Hi, my name is Alex Bent, and just want to start off by saying thanks to the girls of the Change School for inviting me to be part of the summit. Super excited to contribute to this ongoing conversation and dialogue on TCKs. I think it's pretty fascinating. I think it's great what you guys are doing. Before I get into the conversation and the theme for this month, I thought I'd just give you a real quick background on who I am and why I'm a TCK. So I was born in Hong Kong, and my father's British, my mom's Australian. I spent most of my childhood in Hong Kong and went to international schools. Although I spent also a couple of years in boarding school in Sydney, Australia. After school, I went to the UK for university, and also went to Beijing for a year, studying Chinese and business. After uni, ended up working for a Hong Kong company called Swire, and they sent me to the very exotic place of Utah and Idaho. And so I lived there for 2 years, working for, they had the franchise for Coca-Cola in both those states. I then came back to Hong Kong after 2 years, and worked in China for a couple of years, also with Swire, and then left them in 2003, 2004, and have been in Hong Kong kind of ever since. And I've set up a couple of businesses actually, some of which were complete failures, and others which worked out. And I now invest in different companies in Hong Kong, and also have my own company with my business partner. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. I find this particular topic of how can us TCKs with our international perspective and worldview affect positive change in society, particularly interesting, because even though I am like some of you guys out there, even though I am meant to be from the UK or from Australia, I feel no patriotism or nationality to either of those places. And for me, Hong Kong is home. I've spent the majority of my life here. Yet I'm not. A lot of people would argue I'm not from Hong Kong because I'm not Chinese. So I'm kind of a bit of a global nomad, and I'm really proud of that. I think that it has given me a much broader international view, and it's made me much more accepting of people and their views. And I went to a school called United World College in the last 2 years of high school. And there's many United World Colleges around the world. I went to one in Hong Kong called Li Po Chun United World College. Nelson Mandela was, if you're not familiar with UWC, Nelson Mandela used to be the patron along with Prince Charles. And basically it was started by a guy called Kurt Hahn, who also started out with Bound. And the idea was for many different students from many different nationalities, many different countries to come together and to understand each other. So ultimately, being together and living together would lead to a greater international understanding and world peace, I suppose. And I'm actually a great believer in that. There was two guys in school. One was a Palestinian guy, one was an Israeli guy, and they were in my year, and they had a lot of arguments, obviously, about very heated arguments about what their beliefs were and what the conflict in Israel was all about, and it got quite heated. But at the end of the day, after living together for 2 years, they became friends. And as simple as it sounds, that ability to really kind of talk to each other and argue about things, and then understand each other and see how the other person lived and how they're not much different from each other. They're both human. Led to a real understanding of each other and a friendship. And I'm sure if that could be multiplied and bottled, we would have a world which is a lot more peaceful than unfortunately it is today. I'm also currently raising or helping to raise two scholarships for two Sri Lankan students. You know, there was obviously a civil war in Sri Lanka which ended in 2009, and the civil war was between Tamils and Sinhalese. And we're hoping to raise enough money to put two Sri Lankan students, give them two scholarships to go to Lipo Chung United World College. And by doing that, we're hoping that they, just like the Israeli student and the Palestinian student, they get to know each other. They get to know each other's beliefs, get to know each other's ideas, and kind of work through some of the conflicts and barriers that have existed between them for so long. So again, you know, I think that this worldview really allows me, and being a TCK allows me to really open up and try and do my little bit to kind of affect change, you know, in society, and I hope for the better. So, like other speakers, I've been asked to go through a series of questions, and so, you know, I hope I don't bore you too much. But the first question is, what does the term TCK mean to you, and do you identify with being a TCK? I didn't really know about this term TCK until about 5-6 years ago. A good friend of mine, Leslie Lewis, who's done a lot of work on CCKs, TCKs, really kind of educated me on what it was about, and immediately I identified with the term and identified with the group of people that they represent, and really helped me to understand myself and not to feel those times when I kind of felt alone, that I felt misunderstood, and again, I go to, for example, when I was younger, I would go to the States, and people used to think I was from the UK. I would go to the UK, and people where I was meant to be from, UK, and people used to think I was American. In Hong Kong, people said I had a South African accent. I mean, I've never been to South Africa, so I started to understand that there is a group of people like me, and I started to understand why I got on so well with these people who were like me, because they had similar backgrounds and they understood a bit about who I was and where I was from, and I didn't need to explain myself the whole time. And I think that's a common trait of a lot of TCKs, is that when they're put into other environments with people who haven't had an international background, so to speak, there's a lot of explaining they need to do, because sometimes you kind of feel like, and other people think you're kind of a Martian, so for me it was quite a relief to understand that there was another group of people like me as well. Having said that, however, I also kind of try and shy away a little bit from labels, and I've had experiences where some TCKs get a false sense of superiority to people who haven't had such an international background, because they think they're kind of part of an elite, as crazy as it sounds. I don't think that at all. I have friends I have one friend in particular who is from the UK, didn't leave the UK until he was 20, didn't have a passport until he was 20, and yet has an incredibly international view of the world, quite remarkably so. So I think, just because you're a TCK doesn't necessarily mean that you're God's gift to peace on earth. I think you've got to maintain an open outlook of the world and of different people, no matter what their backgrounds are. But to answer the question, yes, I do feel an affinity with being with other people who are also TCKs. Do TCKs share a common set of values and beliefs? Yeah, I think so on the whole. I think if you've had an international background, if you lived in many different countries, if you've grown up without necessarily a fixed identity or a nationalism, you do tend to understand those people, and you do tend to have be kind of more open. I mean, us TCKs, we're often a minority. We're often a minority in the country that we grow up in. I was a minority in Hong Kong. I still am a minority in Hong Kong. And then when I go to other places around the world, I'm not from there. I don't belong there. Especially those places like the UK and Australia, where I'm a passport holder of those two places, and my parents are from there. But I don't feel any kind of affinity towards those places. And what that does to you, I think, gives you a certain insecurity sometimes. But that insecurity, I think, can be quite positive, because it allows you to really understand other people who are minorities, really understand other people who are in tough positions, and ultimately that helps with bridging gaps and breaking down borders, and so those values, I think, and beliefs are definitely inherent in a lot of TCKs, for sure. I think I've kind of answered the next question, which is how would you define the TCK identity, and do we share certain values? I mean, to me, TCK identity is really being a global citizen, being a global nomad, and not being constrained by nationalistic and patriotic beliefs and ideas, and just being open to anything, just being open to change. It's tough. I've been an entrepreneur now for 10 years, and I really believe one of the things that's allowed me to kind of battle through the last 10 years and come out sort of okay is that I always had to deal with change when I was younger. I always had to deal with friends leaving, or in the international environment like Hong Kong, it was very transient. People would come and go all the time. I always had to deal with going to what was then my kind of mother country, I suppose, and trying to understand people there, and also trying to explain myself and trying to explain who I was, where I was from, and I think that's all good attributes to being an entrepreneur. Being an entrepreneur, you have to sort of get up and go every day, and you have to deal with what comes your way, and you have to fight through it and enjoy change. And I think that I'm very grateful in that sense for being a TCK, because it has allowed me to really deal with change on a daily basis, and that, I think, has defined who I am and how I've gone about my life. And again, that's something that I really identify with and I'm very proud of. How can us TCKs and CCKs better externalize our unique experiences and characteristics with the world? I think just by doing. I think everyone has a different set of ideas on what they believe. I believe, as I said right at the beginning of this conversation, that being a CCK or TCK, allows you to have more tolerance towards people, and putting different kinds of people in a melting pot, or a situation where they have to get on with one another, really helps to break down barriers. And so for me, I want to do as much as I can to create those certain dynamics and situations for different people, and that's what's led me to kind of help raise the scholarship for these two students, and also in my daily life, to bring I invest in different companies as well, and I love that, because I'm bringing different entrepreneurs with different ideas and different motivations together, and so I'm trying to do what I can to externalize my experiences and my influences, and that doesn't just isn't limited just to nationalities and bring different nationalities together. It's also bringing different people with different ideas together. and trying to understand one another and learn from each other. So one piece of advice I would give to TCKs trying to establish their identity is just go with it. I mean, it sounds a bit lame, but I'm incredibly proud of being a global nomad and being a global citizen. And I believe, seeing kids today, I believe we're going to be the majority of people in the not too distant future. TCKs are really going to be no longer a minority, but a majority. I see so many kids with a melting pot of different nationalities. I see the world getting much smaller. We're having a summit over the internet, and it has allowed us to communicate much more easily with many different people around the world. And I think being a TCK or a CCK is a gift, and it's something to be celebrated and something to be used. And just use your experiences to really have an impact on the rest of the world, and really open other people's eyes to what can be, and just embrace it. And there's lots of us out there. And I think, as you see from the summit and the good work that the Change School is doing, you're not alone, and being a TCK really helps to understand this globalized world in a much better and easier way.